Sound of a door being violently kicked open, followed by a woman's shrill scream and the guttural roar of a man. A sudden crash, then a tense, pregnant silence, broken only by heavy, ragged breathing. The camera focuses on a shattered door frame, splinters everywhere. A voice, tight with barely contained fury, whispers, they had no idea who they were messing with. You know, there's something sacred about the quiet hum of the forest. The rustle of leaves like a whispered secret. The distant call of a hawk circling high above. That's what drew me here, to this little cabin on the edge of the Whispering Pines community. I bought this place 5 years ago, a haven after decades of the rat race. A place where my biggest concern was whether the deer were eating my hydrangeas or if the morning mist would clear in time for my coffee on the porch. The developer, bless his ambitious heart, carved this small neighborhood out of the woods, selling the dream of harmonious living with nature. What they failed to mention was the nightmare that would bloom from the concrete and perfectly manicured lawns. My property is a bit of an anomaly, a larger, more wooded lot that backs onto a genuine forest preserve, while the rest of the houses are clustered in neat rows, each with its precisely trimmed lawn and identical mailbox. It was paradise, a rustic escape where I could breathe until Karen moved in. Karen, with her perfectly coiffed, blonde bob and an eagle eye for every deviation from the unwritten, and then very much written, laws of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. She embodied everything I'd tried to leave behind, the stifling conformity, the petty power struggles, the endless, soul-crushing bureaucracy. My first encounter with Karen was almost laughably trivial. I had a bird feeder, a beautiful, hand-carved piece that hung from an ancient oak on my property. It brought finches and cardinals and even, on occasion, a curious squirrel. A few weeks after she moved in, a crisply folded letter arrived in my mailbox, emblazoned with the HOA logo. It was a friendly reminder that, unsightly, outdoor fixtures were not permitted. I scoffed. Unsightly? It was a work of art. I ignored it. A week later, a more aggressive letter landed, this time from Karen directly, with her title, HOA President, underlined. It cited a made-up Article 7, Section 3B, Aesthetic Harmony, demanding the removal of the feeder within 48 hours or face a $50 fine. I was livid. $50 for a bird feeder? I called her. Karen, this is ridiculous, I started, trying to keep my voice even. It's a bird feeder on my property, not even visible from the street. Her voice, sharp and unyielding, cut me off. Mr. Peterson, you agreed to the covenants and restrictions when you purchased your home. Article 7 is very clear. We strive for a cohesive aesthetic. Your rustic fixtures? Disrupt that. Rustic fixtures? It's a natural wood bird feeder. Are my trees next? Are they too rustic for your suburban utopia? I retorted, my patience wearing thin. Your trees are a different matter, provided they don't overhang common areas. The feeder must go, Mr. Peterson. This isn't a negotiation. This is my home, Karen, not a military barracks. I'll remove it when I'm good and ready. Which is never. I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking with frustration. That was my first mistake. Underestimating Karen was a luxury I couldn't afford. The fine arrived a few days later, $50, appended with a late fee. I ignored that too. And then another. And another. Each fine, seemingly small, began to accumulate, piling up like dead leaves in autumn. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the principle. It was about my sanctuary being encroached upon, piece by agonizing piece, by a woman who seemed to relish wielding her minuscule power. I dug in my heels, convinced that eventually she'd tire of this petty war. I was wrong. I had no idea the depths of her obsession, or how far she was willing to go over something so insignificant. And I certainly didn't know the storm she was about to unleash. A storm that would shake my quiet world to its very foundations. This was just the beginning. The bird feeder fine was just the opening salvo in Karen's personal crusade against me. After that, it was a relentless barrage of nitpicking and fabricated violations. My lawn, a little wilder than my neighbor's perfectly manicured squares, became a code violation for excessive overgrowth. The charming old wooden fence, separating my property from the common area, which had been there since the development was built, was suddenly deemed a safety, hazard and aesthetic inconsistency that needed to be replaced with approved vinyl. And the latest, the one that really pushed me over the edge, was a $5 fine for, wait for it, improperly stored recycling bins. My bins were, and always had been, neatly tucked away behind a small shrub near my garage. But according to Karen, they were visible from the street, and thus an affront to the aesthetic purity of Whispering Pines. The constant flow of letters, each one more absurd than the last, started to take an emotional toll. My peaceful retreat began to feel like a fortress under siege. I'd walk outside and instinctively scan the street, half expecting to see Karen's sharp-nosed SUV lurking, its driver's window rolled down, her eyes narrowed in scrutiny. Neighbors, once friendly with a wave and a casual chat, started giving me wide berth. Whispers followed me at the community mailbox. Hushed conversations that abruptly stopped when I approached. Karen was a master manipulator, spreading rumors about my disregard for community standards and how I was bringing down property values. One sweltering afternoon, I was watering my garden when Karen pulled up in her SUV, accompanied by her two loyal lieutenants. Bob, a nervous man who always seemed to be adjusting his ill-fitting golf visor, and Carol, whose pursed lips and perpetually disapproving gaze were her defining features. They looked like a miniature self-appointed tribunal. "Mr. Peterson," Karen declared, her voice radiating artificial sweetness that did little to mask the venom beneath. "We need to discuss your outstanding fines." I straightened up, turning off the hose. "There's nothing to discuss, Karen. Your fines are baseless. My recycling bins are out of sight." "Actually," Carol interjected, holding up a printout with a blurry photo, "our surveillance camera clearly shows them visible from the intersection of Whispering Willow and Pine Ridge Lane between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. on Tuesdays." My jaw dropped. "You're putting up surveillance cameras to monitor my recycling bins? Are you serious? What about my privacy?" "Community regulations, Mr. Peterson," Bob mumbled, finally finding his voice, though it cracked slightly. "For the, safety and security of all residents." "This isn't about safety, Bob. It's about harassment. A $5 fine for recycling bins that are barely visible, and you're sending out a SWAT team of busybodies with surveillance photos?" I threw my hands up in exasperation. "This is insane!" Karen stepped forward, her eyes glinting. "The fines are accumulating. Mr. Peterson, the board has voted to pursue all available legal remedies if these are not paid. And frankly, your attitude is not helping your case." "My attitude? You're invading my privacy, making up rules, and turning my neighbors against me over a bird feeder and recycling bins. What exactly is your endgame, Karen? Do you want me to live in a perfectly beige box, devoid of any personality, just to satisfy your delusions of grandeur? We want compliance, Mr. Peterson. The rules apply to everyone, and your current balance, with late fees, is now over $400. She smiled, a triumphant, chilling smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "And if it reaches $500, we have the authority to place a lien on your property." I stared at her, dumbfounded. A lien? Over a few $100s of trumped-up fines? This wasn't just petty anymore. It was an outright assault. I felt a cold knot of dread tighten in my stomach. I knew then that I was in a real fight, one I hadn't anticipated. As they turned to leave, Karen paused, looking back over her shoulder. "You really should consider cleaning up your act. Mr. Peterson, you never know who might be watching." Her words hung in the air, a thinly veiled threat that left me standing alone in my garden, the sun suddenly feeling cold. I had to do something, and fast. But what? My peaceful life was shattering around me, and I was running out of options. The threat of a lien ignited a fire within me, replacing frustration with a steely resolve. I spent sleepless nights poring over the HOA's bylaws, the original development agreement, anything that might give me an edge. The sheer audacity of Karen's actions, the petty tyranny, had awakened something I hadn't felt in years, a fierce protectiveness over my sanctuary. I wasn't going to let some suburban tyrant take away my peace, not without a fight. The accumulated fines, now nearing $500, felt like a noose tightening around my neck. But I refused to give them the satisfaction of paying for their manufactured grievances. My research finally bore fruit. Deep within the archaic language of the original land deeds, before the HOA was even conceived, there was a clause. My property, due to its unique size and direct abutment to the forest preserve, had an easement, a right-of-way that explicitly exempted it from certain aesthetic and structural covenants that applied to the interior lots. It was a golden ticket, a loophole large enough to drive a truck through. It meant Karen's fabricated rules. Her endless stream of fines were null and void where my specific property was concerned. The developer, wanting to sell that particular, more challenging lot, had made concessions. I felt a surge of exhilaration. Armed with this discovery, I called for an emergency meeting with the HOA board. Karen, smug and confident, arrived with Bob and Carol, ready for what she clearly anticipated would be my public capitulation. The tension in the small community clubhouse was palpable. Neighbors, drawn by the drama, filled the room, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Karen started, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Mr. Peterson, we are all here to discuss your continued noncompliance. The board regrets that we must move forward with legal action if these fines are not settled immediately." She gestured towards a stack of papers, clearly my fine notices. I held up my copy of the original deed, highlighted and annotated. "Actually, Karen, there's been a significant oversight. My property, Lot 17, is subject to an easement outlined in this original deed, predating the HOA's current bylaws, which specifically exempts it from the aesthetic and structural covenants you've been so diligently enforcing." Karen's face, usually so composed, faltered. That's impossible. All properties are bound by the HOA. We had legal review everything." "Did they review the original land deeds, Karen, or just the current HOA articles?" "Because it's right here in black and white." I pointed to the specific clause. "My bird feeder, my recycling bins, my overgrown lawn, they are all perfectly within my rights under this easement. And every single fine you've levied against me, including that ridiculous $5 one, is therefore invalid." Bob and Carol exchanged nervous glances. Some of the neighbors started murmuring, turning to look at Karen with dawning realization. Karen, however, was not one to admit defeat easily. Her face hardened, a desperate anger replacing her earlier smugness. "This is a technicality, a trick. The spirit of the community doesn't supersede legal documents." "Karen," I cut her off, my voice calm but firm, "you've overstepped. You've harassed me, spread rumors, and tried to strong-arm me into compliance with rules that don't apply. And now I'm formally demanding a full retraction of all fines, a public apology for the harassment, and for your surveillance cameras to be immediately removed from any area that monitors my property." Karen looked like she was about to explode. Her face was bright red, her hands balled into fists. "You think you've won, Mr. Peterson? You think a piece of paper changes anything? We're the HOA! We have power!" "No, Karen," I said, rising to my feet, my voice ringing with authority. "You had power, and you abused it. And now, you're going to face the consequences." The murmurs in the room grew louder, turning into outright discussions. Karen's reign of terror was crumbling before her very eyes. But as I walked out of that meeting, a strange unease settled over me. Karen's last look, a gaze filled with pure, unadulterated hatred, told me this wasn't truly over. She might have lost this battle, but I knew deep down that a person like Karen doesn't just walk away. This victory felt precarious. I had won the fight, but I had a chilling premonition that the war, in its own twisted way, was only just beginning. So what do you guys think? Has anyone else dealt with an HOA Karen like this? What would you have done? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more crazy stories from the woods. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Because trust me, this isn't the end of the story.